Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We've got an awesome show for you this week. We've been driving something really special, the Porsche 911 Dakar. It's a limited run Porsche 911 that's all set up thematically to the history of the Dakar Rally, which means it's an off-road 911. It's pretty wild. Associate Editor Byron Hurd and I have spent some time in it, as well as a couple other cars. We've been trading cars this week. So it's been a busy week around the shop here at Autoblog. I've also been in the Mercedes E350 4MATIC. We'll talk about the Mazda CX-70 with the inline six, and of course, an update on our Subaru WRX. It's a long-term update. We'll run through some news, talk about some things out of Jeep and some other things. And we have an update on spending your money. It's an LC 500, and it's a good one. So with that, I'd like to welcome in Byron Hurd. How are you, man?
Hey, I am doing well. It's been kind of a wild week here. Like maybe not a lot of automotive news, but we've had tornadoes and things like that here in Detroit. So it's been keeping us on our toes. But no complaints. Yeah,
the tornado was wild. It seemed a little early in the summer for that to be happening, but right now it's just a cool June morning. That's sort of part of June, right before we get into the hot part of summer. It's going to be cool this weekend. Really just a perfect morning. One of those sort of transitional days that's almost kind of gauzy with the sun and, well, in this case, the cottonwood or whatever this is floating everywhere. So it's literally a little fuzzy, but nice time of year.
It is.
All right, so let's get into this Porsche 911 Dakar. This is super wild. You dropped this off at my house yesterday after spending a day with it. There's a lot going on here. So it's lifted, and you can actually adjust the ride height. It has wheel arches, big wheels as well. It is tuned to basically go rallying. Inside, you've got these carbon fiber seats that are super stiff. You can't really adjust them very much, so it's not a very comfortable place. It's got the 473 horsepower motor, PDK. Other than that, it's fairly subtle. The package, that we have is like just sort of a teal color. So we don't have any like the kind of crazy rally graphics. Starts at $222,000. So, I mean, that's pretty wild. So that's kind of the basics of it. It's a limited run vehicle. I think just about 2,500 they're going to make. So if you want one, you got to pay for it. And you should probably, I don't know if they're already sold out, but, I would talk to your Porsche dealer ASAP if you're interested in something like this. It's really a unicorn too, I think. You and I have probably both driven some pretty interesting Porsches, interesting sports cars, interesting off-roaders. But to drive a 911 that's very much set up to go off-roading, it's very much something that I don't expect to drive anything like this again anytime soon. So it's actually more like mid-morning. We're heading towards lunch because I was out still driving this thing and I wanted to get some more impressions. I took it out last night at sunset. It was great. Did a little off-roading, very light off-roading, more like almost like a service road kind of off of Woodward. It was kind of near this golf course. It reminded me of the first time I took the Mach-E off-roading, and I was like, wow, I've never said, hey, I want to take a Mustang and then let's go off-roading. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty wild. What do you think?
I was going into it like thinking this is a $220,000 Porsche, of course, before markup and all that kind. I mean, I doubt any of these are actually selling for just $220,000. Regardless, this thing is just, when you look at it on paper, it's basically a 911 GTS with a lift kit. Yeah. When you actually drive it, it is not that at all. It doesn't, I mean, I don't want to say it doesn't feel like a 911, because when you drive it on the street, especially when you have the suspension hunkered down and you hammer it, I mean, it goes like a 911. It certainly, it's hard to wrap my head around this thing just like as a package. Like I think I told you this yesterday. This is the only car besides the McLaren 720S that I've driven that people have like lost their minds over. Neighbors like literally slamming on their brakes and then backing up to come by the driveway and like, what in the world do you have? And, you know, like most of these people aren't car guys. I live in a pretty working class community on the west side of Detroit. no one's rolling around in 911s, let alone these. So it was a sight. It created a scene everywhere it went. And for a car, I mean, it has the exact same horsepower as my CT4V Blackwing, 473 horsepower, but it punches like a 911 when it's accelerating. It is quicker than my car. It is, that fierce little sports coupe is in there. But the tires on the thing, the tread voids in them are bigger than the ones on the all-terrain tires on my Wrangler. And it's pure absurdity. Everything about it, like if you think it's like a 911 off-road, it's not a formula that anyone would immediately, jump to. It's not like the ultimate end goal of a 911 is to be an off-road vehicle. But for some reason, it comes together so brilliantly. It's just a big dumb laugh of a car. And I mean, if it was $150,000, like if you could, build it the way you can build a GTS and it was like a mass production vehicle, I think these things would sell like crazy. And the fact that it is so limited run and so exclusive, I think is maybe its biggest detriment, because like this is a car that needs to be out there, that people want to experience this thing. And I get that like keeping it expensive and exclusive makes it special, but a 911 is already pretty darn special. Yeah. And, seeing 5 of these a year instead of 1 every 5 years would serve everybody so well. So like, this is my saying, like, hey, if Porsche is listening, let's do this again and let's do a lot more of them, because more people need to be able to experience this thing. It's such a laugh.
Not to throw this too much off the rails, but while I was driving around last night, I was thinking not just Porsche, but other car companies, I think should adopt this template. Take the performance coupe, lift it. Maybe you add all-wheel drive, maybe you don't. But, I think a Mustang would make a ton of sense. Camaro, I don't really think that's their lineage. Miata could be interesting. I don't know if Fiat ever does a coupe again. Hey, I mean, they used to do some rallying. So I definitely think there's some room in here. Volkswagen Beetle, you could do some things in this segment, this like segment one of one that doesn't even exist. But I think you could have some fun here. And, everybody seems to love off-roaders. You could do one at like 60,000. It doesn't have to be this much money. So right. There's room to run here. And so you get past, not that you even want to get past all the off-road stuff, but the flat six, 473 horsepower, 3.2 seconds. This thing can still run. It sounds like it's raspy, it's harsh. PDK is definitely tuned for like, off-road and like, rallying, because it can be a little harsh to drive around town. But it's still a 911 for sure.
Yeah. And even, when you get on it, the speed limiter on this, I believe, is only 149 miles an hour, which that's plenty fast for public roads, but that's still low for even just a 911 Carrera S. I think that's closer to 179, 180, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's objectively slow, and that's really down to the tires, right? Like if this thing had regular summer tires on it, which you can get, I was actually looking at Tire Rack of all places earlier, just to get an idea of like the size of these tires versus like a Wrangler Rubicon 392, which has an even lower top speed limiter on it. That's more a factor of it being a body on frame, relatively short wheelbase SUV with a big stupid V8 in it. But looking at this, like the tire options on this include a summer and a winter option. So Porsche does have an OEM original equipment fit summer tire for this thing. So theoretically, you could run both if you'd like. You can swap them out as you see fit. And with summer tires on it, you could take the thing to the track anytime you want. It will still be a 911. You'll just obviously you won't have the suspension lifted when you're on the track, because that won't be super fun. But although actually maybe it would be kind of fun, especially if you're on a track that has some nasty curves. You could probably take advantage of the extra suspension compliance that way. But yeah, this thing it's a jack of all trades 911, which is not something I really expected to ever be excited about, but it is just such dumb fun.
It is. Ours was shade green metallic, which is probably the only thing that's subtle about this thing. But you can really option it up and get the sort of the rally package. They call it the rally design package, which looks like a Dakar racer. It has, numbers on the sides. It's got the racing stripes. I think I might do that, even though I I mean, I don't know. Daily driving seems like almost like a ridiculous way to try to calibrate your brain around this car, but you don't really need the roof rack and all that stuff, but it sure looks cool. I like it. And this, for those of you who don't know, because this is kind of a deep cut in history, even if you're a Porsche guy, this car is a throwback to the 1984 Paris-Dakar rally, which Porsche won with a car sort of like this. So great history here. I like when they go back into the, get the deep cut of history here and try to bring it out. In that, I think it's very cool in that sense too. Other thing too, like you talk about jack of all trades 911, it's really interesting to drive a 911 with really good visibility that you can like look around you and see stuff. I was like, it was the most confident I've ever felt driving a Porsche 911 or a 718. Just because a sports car, whether it's $100,000, $200,000 or $30,000, there is that sense of you're like close to the ground, you can't see out of it. And it takes a minute to kind of get your bearings. So I liked it in many ways.
Yeah, and I don't know if you actually got a chance to sit in the passenger seat of it. I took my fiance for a drive yesterday before I traded the car with you. And the passenger seat is actually mounted lower than the driver's seat. They intentionally mounted the driver's seat higher so you can see out of it because she couldn't. And granted, she's short. She's quite short, actually. But still, like I actually, because she pointed that out, jumped over in the passenger seat. And especially with those fixed buckets, because, I mean, you have forward and rear adjustment, and that's effectively it.
Yeah.
So like, if it's just too low or too high, you're stuck with it. It is what it is. But you can option this with the 18-way adjustable seats. I had to look it up because that was literally one of the few things. My favorite Porsche seats in the world are the like single adjustable, like the pivoting back carbon bucket seats that they had in the like 987 Cayman R. And I think they still build effectively the same seat in like the Cayman GT4 and stuff like that. They have limited adjustment, but it's still better than what we had in this. And that would be my sweet spot personally. But I think in this, if my only options are the fixed back or the 18-way, I'm going with the 18-way because I did feel like I was a little cocooned by that chair.
Yeah, no, I meant to mention that. It was, I mean, a car like this, I don't necessarily expect like it's a Lincoln with like a million different ways to, change and massage and all that stuff. But I mean, it's not super comfortable. And it did give you that race car vibe. The carbon seats, they're right up, very secure, very rigid. You got to be careful how you get into them, frankly.
Yeah.
And then there's the steering also, I think, gives you the race car vibe too, because it's heavy, but it's also kind of light on center, which means it's a lot of work to drive. This, I think, is different steering that you would be used to in any Porsche you've ever experienced, because it's not that direct linear thing that you might even feel like in the Macan or the Cayenne from an SUV perspective, or just the pure butter that is, say, the 718 or the 911. This is like, it's a workout. You're in there, you're adjusting, you're two-handing it. And it's cool. It's Wrangler. I hate when people just, it drives like a Wrangler. Well, no, it doesn't. But there is that vibe as far as getting a workout of driving something. And it reminded me on the few occasions I have driven race cars, this is kind of what it's like, is you're in there, you're driving the car, you're not comfortable, and you're focused. And that's what they're going for.
Yeah, and everything about driving it is pretty immediate. They did a pretty good job of isolating the road noise. I'm surprised, given how aggressive the tires are. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're only, they're 245, so they're not super wide tires, but 295 in the rear, so decently wide in the rear, and the rears will spin even with all of the nannies on. I mean, if you pull away aggressively from a stoplight, and I'm not even talking about like launch control, but if you just kind of get on it a little bit in the dry, the rear tires will absolutely spin before the thing catches a little bit. It doesn't even like blink the traction control at you or anything. It's just baked into the way the car's throttle management is tuned. So it was meant to be driven a little bit loose, and I noticed it at perhaps higher speeds, especially when cornering, you would detect the tire drift. So you can feel the grip falling away as you're, dialing the steering in, it actually, like, you get really good feedback, but they did a good job of isolating the noise aspect of that from the cabin. Given how raw the rest of the car is, I was actually kind of surprised by how composed it can be.
We should talk too about the design elements. I mean, you're talking like all-terrain side skirts, like wheel arches. That will get your attention. There's the front sort of skid plate, which helps you with the departure and breakover angles, whatever you might be doing. Huge carbon fiber polymer rear spoiler, which is, I think that's really cool because it doesn't shoot up like a wing on like one of the GT Porsches. It's like totally integrated back for like the most intense aero. I was outside of a coffee shop this morning because, you got to drive somewhere, right? So I figured to get a coffee and a pastry, just casually like slack dinged. So I just put my coffee on the spoiler for a second and I realize I feel like eyes on me. And I look over, this guy's like staring at the car, taking a picture of it and zooming it on the spoiler. And I'm like kind of flicking through, deleting like email or something. Like, oh yeah, hey, how's it going? This is pretty wild. Totally forgot I was in this thing for a second. But the wheels look sweet. They're rally sort of style wheels. Yeah, this thing's dripping in carbon fiber too. The seats, the hood is carbon fiber. I went to Fresh Time last night to get some strawberries and fruit, a little bit of bread, just kind of quick midweek grocery tune-up for everybody. And I walk out to the car and you pop the hood, then the frunk, I associate with EVs now, but so I open up the forward compartment and then there's a little latch underneath that you got to slide. You got to slip your hand into there and slide it. You can see all the carbon fiber there, which is really cool. It's a good place to put groceries. And this is, unlike other 911s, this of course does not have a back seat. There's room for one, but that's not what they're going for here because it's, intense, approach to weight reduction. I don't know. What am I leaving out? I mean, just the curb appeal and the visual is just, it's hard to put into words. You got to check out the pictures. We're going to have a story in the coming weeks. So if you're listening to this, we'll probably have it up later in the month. It's cool as hell, man.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Certainly my highlight for the year, and probably my highlight easily going back to that 720S. Just a remarkable machine.
We are getting, allegedly, I don't want to jinx this, but we're getting a Lamborghini Storado, allegedly later in the month. So, I mean, this is the best time of the year for testing out different cars and coming up with great story ideas. So it's a lot of fun here. I also have noticed this. You've maybe even noticed this for your years in the press fleet. It feels like in fall, there's like almost like a going out of business sale. Like we get this like rush of sports cars in like October, and so there's sort of like two seasons, and this is obviously like one of the high seasons. So very cool. Having a lot of fun with it. We'll have a lot of good stories and stuff on this. I'm going to drop some stuff onto Twitter and Instagram, just kind of wet the whistle, but it's a hell of a car. So, all right, let's move on over to, I spent the weekend in the Mercedes E350 4MATIC. It's been a minute since I've been in the just the regular E-Class. I've been, I think, in the EQE more recently, and just the electric Mercedes lineup in general. This one came in at about $82,000. It had the turbo 2-liter inline four turbo with the hybrid assist, which means I got really good fuel economy. 255 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque. Nicely equipped, but not totally loaded. The big thing I would really call out here is I've been putting Mercedes, especially the C and the E-Class, above their BMW and Audi counterparts because of just the overall execution, stem to stern. And for me, that starts with the interior. Just this interior was gorgeous. Leather, well laid out, lots of screens because that's what Mercedes is doing. That to me is a little polarizing, but I still generally liked it and they were easy to use. The ambient lighting was gorgeous. I was coming back from a golf trip and I had played 18 holes that day at a place called the Quarry, which is one of the toughest golf courses in the state. And I didn't play very good, although I had a great bogey on the final hole. If you could have such a thing as a great bogey. So I was pretty tired is my point. I had played 72 holes that weekend. And this thing with its sort of kinetic, it's not a full-on massage, but like a kinetic movement helped keep me help the circulation flowing and keeping me on my toes. And that started to rain like early in the trip. And I'm like, oh man, I just kind of in my head thought, I'm just going to cannonball home 6 o'clock, finish the 18th hole. I'll be home by like 9:30 because we were up north, as we say in Michigan. Rain starts pouring. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I stop for gas, get a coffee, working my way, downstate. It's getting pretty bad. So I'm thinking, well, what do I do? I don't really want to stop. It's 4MATIC, that can help a bit and things like this. So what I did is I just kept saying, hey, Mercedes. And I kept pulling up whatever song came into my head. And whether it was Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, it was just Mercedes sort of digital assistant became my personal DJ. And I kind of forgot about the rain. It just, was paying locked in attention to the road, but also just listening to music, great sound system, and I actually had a great time. By the time I got home, I still was like, wow, I made good time. The stress factor was gone. So, and yeah, man, this thing has everything as far as whatever digital music catalog you might be interested in. I mean, deep cuts, it was very much like Kit in Knight Rider, where you would say something and then the ambient lighting would give you a response. If you were drifting lanes, the ambient lighting would flag sort of red. Just a really cool experience of the interior. The only song, literally I picked probably 20 songs. It was only tripped up on a couple. The one song was picked up or confused by was The Wait by the band. So I said, play the band, and it figured it out. So good song for the end of the road trip too, I think. So yeah, I mean, I like the outside. I think they've cleaned up some of their sort of contours, concave styling. It seemed like for a while they tried to make every car look like a CLS, and now it's cleaned up, tapered up. I think that's where BMW might have an edge. You might prefer some of the BMW styling if you're into that, or Audi. But stem to stern, I think the E-Class is the best in segment. And this weekend test drive, reinforced that for me. So pretty good value too for $82,000. That's a weird sentence to say, but you get a ton of stuff, and it is competitive for what the other German car makers are doing. So have you been in an E350 or any E-Class lately?
I was actually in an E-Class just when we were doing the electric car comparison last month, which is live on the site. Go check that out. We had that as one of our swap and support vehicles so we could get everything moved around. So I spent a little bit of time in that. I actually think I got to drive that downtown to the Fisher or something like that for a show. I do remember actually spending some time in it. And I've been a fan of the most recent E-Class for a while. I actually really, really quite like them. And like you, even more than the EQE, especially just because it's frankly more attractive to look at. So yeah, this is definitely in the Mercedes lineup, one of the highlights for me. And I believe it was an E450 that I had, so I had a leg up on you engine wise. I don't remember doing much with it performance. It was just the 36 hours where I was actually driving the thing, just using it as a luxury vehicle. Did take a couple friends to the airport, so yeah, they got high marks from my passengers. So yeah.
When you look at the segment, especially as it relates to Germans, but also, Cadillacs in there, Lexus, et cetera, where do you put the E-Class? You think it's one or two, number one for sure, distant fifth? I don't know. Where are you at on the E-Class these days?
For me, that would, for luxury midsize, I would actually probably put it first, just holistically. It's the most luxurious of the interior options. You have the most customizable options, the most, just kind of, you can build it pretty much however you want. And, my Audi and BMW offer similar things. With Mercedes, you just feel like the luxury part comes first, and maybe not in the same way it does with BMW and Audi that kind of lean a bit more toward performance or all-wheel drive. And since Mercedes has never cared quite as much as about having the best handling and all that, I think it shows on the luxury side of things. So it's generally my first pick in the hierarchy.
That's a great way to put it too. I think I would still definitely consider a 5 Series, but if from the driving perspective, and nothing wrong with any of the Audi options, but I just feel like if you're leaning a little more towards luxury and sort of that, I mean, we'll use a Cadillac term, art and design, to me, the Mercedes does it all, whereas the Audi is a little more polarizing. I suppose you could throw the CT5 in there, which is a great car, but yeah, I like the E-Class a lot. So
yeah, I mean, you can be really excited about the CT5's dynamics, but when it comes time to build one, you're not going to get anywhere near the E-Class and luxury, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I mean, there's probably decent parity. I haven't looked recently, where they do actually overlap. The Cadillac, I'm sure, does perfectly well. But once you get to the point where Cadillac stops competing, Mercedes just runs away with it. So,
all right. Sounds good. So let's talk about this Mazda that we were both trading off this week. This is the CX-70. We've both spent a fair amount of time in the CX-90. That's a long-termer. But this one for me hit a nice sweet spot. It had the straight six. It's the 2-row version of the CX-90. And it was almost exactly the same as our long-termer. Albeit with a nicer interior. It had more leather. It was kind of like a saddle brown with some plush surfaces. So my mini review is I like the straight six a lot better. I like the dynamics of the CX-70. It did feel a little more like that sporty Mazda vibe that you're kind of going for versus the CX-90, which I felt with its kind of heavy steering, that felt a little out of place for me at a large 3-row crossover. So I liked all of that Mazda goodness in a slightly smaller configuration. And I mean, obviously the straight six powertrain to me is just a gem. I like that a lot. It's a great engine, way better than the plug-in hybrid in our long-termer. So what did you do for your night in this thing?
So yeah, I really haven't done a whole lot with it yet. I pretty much parked it into the driveway next to the CX-90 long-term, which is great because they're both white. And I was a little amused by the fact that like on the little fender, the fake fender vent badge on both of them, the long-term vehicle we have is the plug-in version. It says PHEV right there on the thing. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Denote that it's a hybrid. Then I looked over at the other one and they literally spell out inline six on the little thing. And I was like, that's a little silly. Like that seems unnecessary to me. Like there can be the one that isn't a hybrid can just, it doesn't need to say inline six on it. I appreciate it. And I'm sure the lot boys at the Mazda dealerships appreciate it because it'll make it a little easier to figure out which car, especially if they're all white or all gray or all black, like dealer lots tend to be these days. But I thought that was a little weird. So, but yeah, I'm going to do some stuff with that this week. So take advantage of the big cargo area, do some landscaping and garage build related stuff. But I'll do some comparison photos and a little write up on that just to kind of give everybody a sense of how much extra space you get in the CX-70 versus the CX-90.
Nice. So just to be clear, you have both our long-termer and this thing in your driveway, and you're kind of, oh, that's hilarious. Do you ever walk out of your garage or your house and you grab the wrong key fob or you're confused, you get in the wrong car? Your neighbors, I'm sure, are like, what's going on here? Yeah.
Well, and I've it's been especially bad because I'm having the new garage slab has gone in. It's literally just like 30 days old. It's just cured. The 911 is the first car I've literally parked on the fresh concrete since I had it poured, which I felt like was an appropriate christening because it's worth about as much as my entire property, so why not? And but yeah, like I've iced myself this week because I parked the Wrangler where I normally would charge the plug-in or any other EV that I have. So I haven't actually plugged the CX-90 in since I got it. It was delivered to me with a little bit of charge, and I've been I've mostly just been city driving it, so I've been bouncing in between probably about a 20% and 0% state of charge on the battery. And I've yet to actually plug it in. So driving the inline six feels quite punchy because I'm getting a full 6-cylinder engine instead of the truncated 4-cylinder attached to the electric motor in the PHEV. So so far, the inline six would be my pick, but I haven't really given the PHEV a fair shake yet. So.
All right. Sounds good. Well, more on that to come. And since we are talking about long-termers, you have the WRX. You did a long-term update on that recently, talking about, I would say, your grief over having to give the car up. You had a really good time with it, as I think we frankly all have. Give me your final assessment of your roughly month with our long-termer.
I really, really, really enjoyed it. I only have like 2 or 3 complaints about the car. I wish the initial brake pedal feel was a little more aggressive. Just a tad more bite would be nice. It feels a bit soft sometimes. It makes the car feel heavier than it is, because it's really not. It's actually surprisingly lightweight for being an all-wheel drive car. The sound system, even the premium, I believe it's Harman Kardon in the limited, is perfectly fine. But it kind of made me regret getting the CD player accessory, because like you can't really enjoy the extra fidelity you get from a lossless like CD quality recording. So that's kind of a mixed bag. And it's just like the infotainment is there and it works. That's about the nicest thing I can say about it. It's fine. I would skip it, honestly. I would get a premium, or actually I think you might even have to go down to a base to get the standard screen and not get and I would just, let my phone do the rest, because there's just not enough there really in my mind to compel the upgrade. And I've also, in this time, I also drove the WRX TR, which is a 2024 model, and our long-termer is older. So the one thing that pointed out to me is they've gone away from the monostable turn signal stock in the 2024. So you get a regular turn signal that actually stays put. When you push it all the way down, you have to reset it once all the normal things you expect from a turn signal, instead of the silly little one that returns to center all the time. And driving the 2024 made me wish the 2023 didn't have that feature. So anyway, just really small things. I mean, I'm nitpicking here. Like it's a great little car. It's super fun to drive. It really likes being driven as hard as you like, or just puttering around. Like it is it's a very versatile, fun little thing. If it wasn't orange, it would be subtle as all get out, even with the silly fender cladding on it. So yeah, I was really impressed by it. And if I were in the market for that kind of thing, I've never been a WRX fan in my life. This is like a new feeling for me, a whole new sensation. If I was in the market, I would go for it without hesitation.
Yeah, I would say, again, as far as like, if I were in the market, this is about as good as you can do. It's so much fun. It's, it's a fun vehicle. It does everything you want it to do. I'm looking forward to it coming back through my personal fleet. I was among the first to get into it. So, and I did sort of like one of our first winter tests with it. So I'm looking forward to getting into it with like the winter tires, really being able to like just, beat on that gearbox, and just, the last couple like weeks as we really start to get into like the early part of summer here, and it's light until like almost 9:30. I've been taking some of these amazing cars and just driving till like leave at like 8:45 and drive till almost 10 o'clock. It's still warm out. I mean, it's awesome. So this is a car I'd like to do that in. It's crazy how like in the winter, at like 6:30, it's dark out, or sometimes 4:30, and like you're done with the day. But like literally last night, my thought was, well, I already cut the grass last night at like 9 o'clock. I think I'll go for a drive tonight, and then come home, take a hot shower, go to sleep, and maybe watch the Tigers try to struggle to get some offense, and it's a nice time of year. It really is. All right, so let's move along here to our news section. We'll talk about the future of the Supra. This is a report that we had that I think is kind of interesting, that we don't really know what's going to happen. The BMW Z4 is going to end production next year, and Toyota has really not said anything. I guess the sort of the crux of this is, does Toyota have the ability or the want to try to go it alone on this? I don't know. I would honestly say no. But on the other hand, you look at the ethos of their company for the last 10 years, is they have been interested in sports cars, right down to the 86, in partnership with Subaru for the BRZ, which I think I'm about to get one of those later today. It's Sports Car Week. So what do you think is next for the Supra? Is this a short kind of solar flare life, or are we going to see more of it?
Honestly, it's been so popular and so well received that it seems like they have a lot of incentive to continue with it if they can. And this has had me thinking a little bit about Mazda's kind of been in no man's land with their rear-wheel drive platform development on like smaller vehicles. Like we're getting it in the SUVs. And there were rumors of a new Mazda 6 that seemed to kind of come and go. And Toyota and Mazda, obviously there's a business relationship there. It would be really nice to see a shared platform between those two companies, because you could produce because you could get a hybrid powertrain out of it. Then maybe, Mazda keeps saying, oh yeah, we want to do a rotary hybrid. Okay, sure, maybe. But if you have a platform where you can share the costs of at least the chassis and the hybrid components with Toyota, and let Toyota do an inline six or something like that for their version of it for the Supra, and keep a Renesis or something like that alive on the Mazda side of things to do a new RX coupe of some kind, that's kind of a win-win. Or even turn it into a sedan option for Mazda if they're really intent on doing a new Mazda 6 or something like that again, and stick with just a standard inline cylinder engine instead of doing a rotary like that. I think there's potential there that both companies could benefit from. Obviously, Mazda would benefit more from Toyota's scale and all of that, but I mean, it gets Toyota out of having to deal with the Germans, which maybe they enjoy working with BMW. Maybe it's a good relationship. I don't know. But it never really felt like it gelled for me in the character of the vehicle itself. And, a Japanese collaboration with a company that they already have a business stake in seems to make a lot more sense to me in terms of just kind of like the holistic, vehicle. So there's potential there. I don't know if Mazda can spend enough money to make it worthwhile for Toyota to do it. And I don't know if Toyota wants to spend enough money to make it worthwhile for Mazda to do it. So it's maybe not the best situation for it, but the product, I think, would be very good if they went down that road. So I would like to see them explore that if they think it's viable. But,
it's a platform question. I think there's a number of engine tie-ups, or I think Toyota just has something on the shelf they could use to make it work. But without BMW doing the chassis work, they got to figure that out. And if I were a betting guy, I'd put it at 50-50 that they either go it alone or find a teammate. Mazda, to your point, makes a ton of sense. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's 50-50 for the Supra. Maybe it even goes away for a few years, sort of like the Camaro, then comes back is like the Supra with a different, maybe they stretch a platform or shorten a platform. I don't know. Yeah. But I would just bring it all together. 50-50 is what I would say.
And they have the RCIS platform is still there. That's a very old car at this point. Yeah. The fundamentals of that are pretty old. And they also have the LC, chassis. Like they have rear wheel drive vehicles in their lineup that aren't just BMWs. So there's stuff there they can work with, but whether they can modernize any of that to the extent that would make everybody involved happy and content with, moving forward. Because I don't see like the RC or Lexus IS being like a good candidate for electrification, because it's just, it's an ancient platform at this point. Yeah. So maybe LC is in better shape, because actually I'm not familiar with the fundamentals of that chassis, so I don't actually know like what they can and can't do with it. But they're selling a very expensive luxury vehicle on it right now, so it can't be all that bad.
That's true. We'll get to that in the spend my money segment here. It's a good one. All righty. So this is kind of insidery, but the Geneva Motor Show is officially canceled, which for those of us of a certain age, it's stunning, because this was one of the top 3 biggest shows on the calendar for years, for decades. It was neutral ground. So all the European automakers showed up in force. The Americans would dabble with it. A lot of times, like Corvette had a history of showing different performance models there. I believe they showed the first Corvette convertible back there in the early 50s. So like the Americans didn't totally ignore it. Ford always had a big European presence. This to me would be the equivalent of the Detroit Auto Show being canceled, like forever. They are going to sort of relaunch it, next year, do it a little bit differently. It's not really the Geneva Motor Show anymore. They're going to move it to Qatar. So, to me at that point, they did try that last year as sort of an interim solution, but it's at this point, I don't even know what they're going to call it, but it's not the Geneva Motor Show anymore. So a little insidery here, but to a broader point, a lot of you Autoblog readers in March, this is when you saw all those crazy concepts, all the cool cars, like, BMW would basically preview what it's going to do for the next year. So, to me, it just speaks to the fact that motor shows they're different, and they're never going to be built what they were even 5 years ago. And the fact that the whole notion of too big to fail, I mean, that, clearly the business model has changed. So had a lot of great memories of the Geneva Motor Show. First time I went to Europe in 2010, went over there, and it was an unbelievable show. I actually hung out with one of our contributors, Jonathan Ramsey, and, we had some good times. But it was a glitzy show, but a hard working show, a lot of news. So, I mean, what do you think this portends for auto shows? I mean, you think more are going to fall by the wayside?
I mean, it seems inevitable. And I mean, Americans may have more of a love affair with car than some others, but I mean, Germany certainly has its own history, and, Switzerland being right next door, you're talking about a lot of heritage there that, lacking the momentum that it once had is hard for everybody. But at the same time, I mean, shows are about exposure, and if the automakers are getting their exposure in other ways, and that's online and through social channels and all that, then they're content with whatever the new normal is. And that's something we'll just have to adjust to, especially considering, that we're also getting materials from them digitally instead of having to rely on, physical media and things like that the way we did 15, 20 years ago. So if the landscape's changed, then the consumption experience has changed, and everything changes with it. And, we're kind of along for the ride to an extent.
Yeah, I think the big thing was obviously COVID. The show, reading our story, the show was 95% ready to launch in March of 2020. And then they canceled it, and they took a huge financial hit. And that just they weren't apparently able to come back from that. So I kind of feel like it would probably still be sort of trucking along if it wasn't for that. But so it goes. I mean, Paris has been greatly diminished. Frankfurt, which was on a sheer scale the biggest auto show, is in Munich now and much diminished. Detroit's going to try to give it another go back in January of next year. LA and New York seem to be hanging on pretty good for what they are, which is big American cities with mid-level shows. And I think they've managed to maintain that sort of mid-level show, perhaps because it's so desirable to, show your car in New York or LA. But I mean, we'll see. I mean, a vehicle we'll talk about, we'll say right now, the Jeep Wagoneer S. This is the EV. Probably would have been shown in New York if this were a few years ago, but Jeep chose the New York Auto Show. It was shown in New York, but instead they showed it 2 months later, and I think they rung the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. It was just a different way to get their message out. So I think that's what we're going to see automakers doing more and more of. And it hasn't always been that way. Ford showed the Mustang at the New York, or the World's Fair in New York back in the 60s. They didn't show it at the New York Auto Show. So, auto shows haven't always been these sort of Super Bowl events that we maybe are used to. But let's talk about this Wagoneer. Joel Stocksdale, our news editor, was there. It's pretty good looking Jeep. It almost has a bit of a Land Rover or Jaguar kind of look to it, which I think is a good thing. This is the first full electric Jeep. We're talking over 600 horsepower, 617 pound-feet of torque. It's got two electric motors. This thing will get to 60 in 3.4 seconds, which is only 0.2 of a second slower than the 911 Dakar. Not that you would ever have occasion to race them. But this is a big step for Jeep. It's built on the STLA platform, the large version of that. So they build all sorts of things on that, including the new Charger. I think this is going to be a winner for Jeep. I think they needed to they're going right at the heart of the market, which is the heart of the market that you can monetize. Let me clarify that, which is slap a Jeep name on it, make it luxurious, give it a ton of range, and it's going to be expensive. But I doubt they'll lose money. So I'm excited, ready to drive this thing.
Yeah, it looks pretty impressive. I'm not a huge fan of the Wagoneer's styling, but I actually think the Wagoneer S looks very good. And I'm assuming it's going to have a lot more in common with like the Dodge Stealth that is, still forthcoming. But, same platform, same general form factor. And this, like the aggressive and kind of more chiseled off lines really work on this car. I think they help make the Wagoneer look less cumbersome than the ICE models do, to me, of course.
I don't hate the Wagoneers, the Grand Wagoneers, but I'm totally with you on that. As far as, I think in a vacuum, they look okay. But to me, they had an opportunity to do like a very special, luxurious Jeep with character. And what they ended up with, I think, is something that could easily fit in the Lexus or GMC lineup. And that's not a diss to either of those companies, but Jeep has a very unique design language. And to me, they just made a squared off, SUV from Detroit. It looks like a big three SUV, and it doesn't look like a Jeep. This could be a Tahoe, so without the grille. So, all right. So check out Joel's story. He's got all the specs, all the details. He spoke to a number of Jeep and Stellantis executives. One of the things he kind of drilled out of them is that the Ramcharger powertrain is going to be used for the Wagoneer 4xe, which is the a variant of the different electrified powertrains they're using. I think that's an interesting move. I think that it's like an extended range hybrid, but with still a lot of electric range. And I'm sure they'll tailor the EV specs to each segment. So the Ramcharger will be different from this Jeep. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I would say was expected, but Jeep is really going to be getting into the electrified game here in a big way in the next year or two.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see like what Jeep is doing with the 4xe kind of as a concept, because up until this point it's essentially been just like an oversized motor stuck in like where the starter goes, and it's just kind of like a very simplistic plug-in hybrid system to like not to knock them. I mean, they developed it rather quickly. It kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, we got the Wrangler 4xe pretty much overnight. It just sort of appeared. It's like, oh, there it is. We've got a plug-in now. And so like it was, I think rudimentary might be the best way to describe the implementation of the original 4xe. And then now we're going to a very wildly different interpretation of that marketing, where now it's essentially a range extended electric car. So 4xe no longer means one thing, which will be confusing to both us and potentially, shoppers and readers. That's what we're here for. We will guide you, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see what else they do with it. Because if you go to Europe, they've got a new, I forget what the name of the little subcompact is over there, that is now also being offered in what they're calling a 4xe that is actually just kind of, I think it's actually even just a mild hybrid and not even a full hybrid. So what 4xe means seems to be varying greatly depending on which vehicle you're looking at. And I think that's going to continue to be the case more and more as Jeep progresses through this lineup. But it's we're in a transitional period. It's to be expected, but it's going to be interesting kind of having these conversations with buyers and setting expectations for them, given the kind of wildly different definitions we're landing on here.
I think 4xe is just going to become another almost marketing term versus a technical term. It'll just mean that when you buy a Jeep, in some way, it's an off-road ready, sort of electrified in some form vehicle. So
yeah, and Jeep's certainly not the only place. Like Volvo has done this with the Recharge. Recharge means different things depending on which model you're looking at. So yeah, it's certainly not without precedent.
Well, what the hell does AMG or M or V mean at the moment? So I mean, these are some historic names, and if Jeep wants to take 4xe, which I don't think most people know even what the hell it means, by all means, Jeep, do what you got to do. So
yeah, I don't even think. I mean, honestly, even in our circles, some people still say 4xe just because they no one said 4xe out loud to them and had them go, "Oh, of course," because But and I mean, it's kind of a silly idea to begin with, but that's a conversation for another time.
They did confirm the Gladiator finally is getting the 4xe. I'd give myself a small pat on the back. I had that scoop about a year ago, and then they just didn't say anything. And that actually made me start to wonder. I was like, hey, guys, don't cancel it. That make me look bad, like you're holding the bag. Like you were right when it was written, but then something changed, but no, then they confirmed it. So that's going to be a neat one. But again, that 4xe is vastly different than like a Ram Charger based 4xe. But
yeah,
also the vehicle I'd be very interested in checking out if I could get a good deal on one.
same. Especially now since we're seeing like it's got spy shots of what looks like a hybrid Maverick with all-wheel drive.
Yes.
So we're going to have 2 new hybrid pickup trucks potentially over the next couple of years, in addition to the Toyota Tacoma, which we already have. So things are changing, and more transition.
Maverick's definitely, I think, a segment where Ford has some room to run. I think they should do a lot of different things with that sort of tapestry. I think that's, as time passes, that was a brilliant move to get rid of the Focus and put a pickup truck in there that can be a daily driver. It can actually do some truck stuff. It's affordable. I mean, now they need to hybrid it up, sport it up. You can have some fun with that. And I think you'll get more and more buyers. So kind of a footnote, but the Cherokee is back. That seems to be, or it will be, according to reports. It seems to be doing things like the Camaro, like the Land Cruiser, which is where something gets, sunset, and then lo and behold, 8 months, 18 months, we hear rumblings that it's coming back. I think the big deal is that they didn't really have a spot to build it, as they were shuffling different, their product lineup. But we think we're going to get probably official word by the end of the year. So, I mean, I kind of thought this was inevitable, but yeah, we'll see. It sounds like it's going to be built in Mexico, where they're building the Compass right now. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it fits in a segment where there's a lot of different buyers, and Jeep, has been there for a long time. I think for me, the big question will be is, how do they position it? What kind of powertrain we talking here? We don't really know that. And then what kind of design do they go with? It was controversial when they made it this. I think aesthetically it looks very good, but it was very controversial when they brought it back, and it wasn't this box on wheels like, the iconic 90s one was. But we'll see. I mean, frankly, I think that would be a good move, is bring back the box and, yeah. What do you think?
I'm 100% with you. I mean, given the new Land Cruiser and the very strong hint from Nissan that we might get a new Xterra, I think a Cherokee could really win. And really what I think Jeep could do is essentially make a Recon that has an ICE powertrain or a hybrid powertrain instead of a dedicated EV. So you can go with that whole, the boxy, square, European-looking Jeep, not a Wrangler, but kind of Wrangler adjacent, with a full fixed body, skip the, the removable roof stuff. Do a new chip, basically just like the XJ, and you can push hybrid and ICE there versus the full electric and Recon, and you hit all your customers that way. I mean, that's just that, to me, that feels like almost a no-brainer. So something like that, especially if they can nail the styling, if they can give us something that says 90s Cherokee, because that's a car that not even just car enthusiasts it's a culturally significant shape. It's like the 60s 70s Broncos, how those are Hollywood cars now.
Mm-hmm.
Cherokees are starting to become Hollywood cars too. You're seeing it, Harry Bosch drives one in the Amazon series, mm-hmm. Stuff like that is nice. Culturally out there. So I think there's Jeep can run forever on Wrangler. I mean, they could probably be the only vehicle they ever build and they'd still be successful. But Cherokee certainly has a place in all of our hearts, I think, and it would be nice to see it come back in a way that really honors the old name. Yeah,
100%. Is Bosch a pretty good show? I'm looking for some reviewing. Is that on the list I should be adding?
If you like, cop drama type stuff, absolutely. It's a grittier. It's kind of the gritty love letter to LA, kind of the way The Wire is the gritty love letter to Baltimore. But it is not nearly as intense or depressing as The Wire. It is a far more, not uplifting. I will not call it uplifting, but it is less misery inducing than The Wire can be at times.
I want to watch the season where it's centered around the Baltimore Sun of The Wire, but
that's the final season.
Is it the final one? Okay, it's a little intense, and my sort of binge watching from say 10 to 11, maybe midnight, depending on when the dog decides she wants her final bathroom break. It needs to be a little kind of fuzzy. It can't be too hard hitting, and this, I don't think that's going to fit that. So
that's a tough one. Yeah, I would not recommend that for late night watching if you want something to fall asleep after.
Yeah. All right. So that is most of our news segment. We will close things out just with a kind of a sad note. Parnelli Jones passed away this week at 90, one of the great racers of the second half of the 20th century. He was the oldest living Indy 500 winner, which I didn't quite realize. Obviously great in some of the sports car series of the 70s and 80s. I had occasion to meet him once at Pebble Beach. In 2000, I think it was 11 or 12, he was there for the launch of the Boss Mustang. And it was a very memorable interview. If you Google it hard enough, you could probably still find the story on Auto Week. Ford got us out there to Laguna Seca at dawn, and he was just kind of there to be an ambassador about the Boss, which was cool. And like the sun was coming up over the track, it was still kind of dark. And I remember, it's interesting when you interview people, some people are nervous, some people are cagey, some people don't say anything, some people say way too much, or they try to do stand-up. It's just like, wow, don't talk to the media, or maybe even other humans for that matter. But it was a very memorable interview because he was so calm, so insightful. I can still remember how clear his blue eyes were, which made me think this is exactly the guy you want driving a race car. Every answer was just precise, no stumbling, exactly to the point. Very cool gentleman. So, obviously, we salute him as well.
And a fellow fan of bright orange performance cars. So
there we go.
Those are my people.
All right. So let's close things out. We have an update on spending your money. And this one, Sean from Fort Collins says he took delivery of his 2024 Lexus LC 500, and he says it's an amazing car. Well, hey, glad to hear it. The engine sound alone is worth the price. Facts. I would agree with that. I did swap out the trim pieces above the taillights with some black chrome pieces. Okay. Sounds good. This is the first coupe the dealership has sold for the 2024 model year. Love the podcast. Hey, Sean, thank you for listening. So pretty cool update. We've kind of batted this one around a couple times and Spend My Money. We gave some direction a while back about whether he should go for the new model year. And we did a review on this just a few days ago, actually, May 30th. Zach Palmer, our road test editor, got into the 2024. So, it's a beautiful car. Who knows if this powertrain will begat the next Supra. It's righteous. Zach actually drove the hybrid, but to me, it's all about the 5-liter V8. That's a gem of an engine that Lexus, when they got back into really doing performance machines, that 5-liter really gave them some life. And, it's a rocket ship. So I think you made a good call here, Sean. I don't know. Do you have a dissent here, Byron, or I highly doubt it.
No, absolutely not. I was actually just behind an LC 500 convertible days ago and was admiring it. I actually sat behind him in the lane far too long because he wasn't going fast enough, but I just wanted to enjoy it a little bit before I moved along. Yeah, that's a wonderful car. And I agree with you 100% on that V8 too. From when it really kind of started punching up in the ISF until now, it's been an absolute gem. I'd really like to drive the IS 500,
yes,
the F Sport Performance.
Get the F Sport, yeah.
I haven't had a chance to drive that, and I'm hoping one more of those will come through before Lexus actually closes the book on that. But
that's a lot of car, man. That is, I drove one of those. It was a while ago. It was in the fall, and I remember thinking, temperature needs to stay above 45 degrees because I think it was still on summers, and that thing's a beast. All right. So, I should make a note. I just heard this on the radio this morning. This is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We're recording this podcast today. So, kind of cool. And obviously a salute to anybody who obviously is still with us out there from, that historic day and all veterans. So, June 6th. So kind of cool. Well, that's all the time we have this week. If you enjoy the show, please give us 5 stars at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you might get the Autoblog Podcast. Be safe out there. Shout out to our producer, Eric Meyer, and we'll see you next week.